Why would such a misfortune happen to an ordinary Scandinavian family? The only possible answer is coincidence. When it happened, my wife Samantha was 35 years old, the mother of two boys aged 9 and 7. Without makeup, with her hair in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, as she usually looked in her spare time, she was hardly noticed by anyone. The only difference at work was that instead of jeans and a t-shirt, she wore a skirt and blouse. Of course, with her hair styled, makeup on, and wearing a nice dress, she could be a very attractive woman. But the people who were causing us trouble had never seen her like this when they started making attempts on her. Samantha had worked as a secretary for a small manufacturing company for 5 years when the two brothers who founded it sold the business and retired. The new owner, a nationwide investment company, sent two men, Christopher and Greg, from their headquarters to temporarily replace the brothers until they could sort out management and find permanent staff. Christopher and Greg were married, but their wives had no intention of moving to our small town. The office had a small female staff: my wife, her friend Gloria, a 32-year-old married woman, and 3 older female employees ranging in age from 59 to 61. The problems began a month later when Gloria quit after an argument with Christopher, who was trying to induce her to have sex. Christopher was not worried, as he planned to hire an acquaintance of his named Rose to take Gloria's place. Rose was a 30-year-old unemployed brunette whom Christopher met during a business trip to her hometown and became romantically involved with. Within days of her arrival at the office, everyone learned that Christopher and Rose had more than just a working relationship. Even Greg, the new assistant, wanted to have an affair on the side. Not finding anything suitable in the bars of our small town, he decided to try to do it in the office where Samantha was the only option. Greg began courting her. She found it amusing at first and told me about his clumsy attempts. Instead of immediately saying, "No thanks," she agreed to lunch with him several times at nice places, and even did small favors for him in the form of shopping. Greg was quite shy, and as she told me, had only received a few innocent hugs for his advances. I warned her not to go too far in her teasing, because that kind of game could turn into something serious. Samantha promised to keep things under control and never give false hope. After Samantha told me some gossip about Christopher and Rose's new girlfriend, I was curious. I knew that an old classmate of mine who lived in Rose's hometown was a pretty partying bachelor who might know something interesting about her. I called him to find out more. Turns out he knew Rose well and told me that she was married to a nice guy. There were no rumors about her in town until a neighbor's wife left a USB drive with work at home and came back to get it on her lunch hour. When she got home, she found her husband in bed complaining of a terrible headache. Smelling perfume and seeing her husband's boxer briefs on the floor, she opened the closet door and found Rose naked. In a rage, the wife punched Rose, who fell, hit her head on the floor, and lost consciousness. The wife called Rose's husband at work. He arrived, took her home when she woke up, and filed for divorce the next day. With a large black eye, Rose soon became a laughingstock and earned a reputation as a whore. I believe Christopher met her on a business trip and apparently couldn't resist the temptation. Rose noticed Greg's interest in Samantha and his inability to achieve real intimacy. She didn't like that Samantha teased Greg and then pretended to have high moral principles. Rose decided to help Greg by pretending to be friendly with Samantha and getting her to agree to Greg's advances. It was a serious challenge, and she knew she had to proceed with caution. During coffee breaks and lunches, she began to tell Samantha about how most married men take advantage of women and the need for female liberation. At first, Samantha thought it was nonsense and told me so, but the constant repetition did the trick. Over time, Samantha began to find some truth in Rose's words. She began to think that marriage could be a trap for the wife. It seemed to her that I was gaining more advantages in our marriage and trying to keep her in that trap by denying her the opportunity to respond to other feelings that appealed to her. Of course, Rose forgot to mention that the reason her own marriage collapsed was because her neighbor's wife came home unexpectedly and found her husband naked in bed and Rose naked in the closet. Rose also kept silent about her tears and pleas for forgiveness. Instead, she claimed that men are pigs who want to use women as maids and control their sex lives. I can't deny that our marriage began to suffer from Samantha's new behavior. The number of fights increased from a few a year to almost weekly. I accused her of bringing home nonsense from Rose and compared me to a wooing coworker who takes her out to lunch at nice places to get perks. But during these fights, she always flatly denied that Rose's experiences or Greg's innocent advances had anything to do with our problems. In her opinion, everything she was unhappy about was all my fault. She accused me of not understanding what a modern and equal woman in the free world wanted and needed to do to feel better about herself. I tried to figure it out, but never got a straight answer from her as to what exactly she wanted for her satisfaction. One Wednesday night, she told me that at the end of next week, the main office wants the staff to go on a team-building hike, for everyone to work as one to accomplish one goal, and other obvious nonsense. After some debate, she admitted that the entire team was her, Rose, Christopher, and Greg, who planned to bond while rafting down the river on a raft with a tent. Renting such a raft was a popular tourist attraction, and I suggested doing it for the family for the weekend. Then she called it a silly suggestion and refused to go. I had a hard time hiding my anger when I told her I was surprised that she had refused to go with her family for a number of reasons, and now wanted to go with her coworkers. Even if she had tried to refuse Greg, it would have been difficult after a few drinks, and on a small raft, she would have had nowhere to get away from him. And you could forget about any help from the other couple, who were already lovers, and perhaps even looking forward to some foursome as the usual behavior of their so-called united team. I finished my words. Hell no, my wife won't go. She kicked up a fuss, became enraged, and screamed, "You don't own me or my body. I am a free woman. I have every right to go wherever I want doing my job. Do you understand? Oh yes, you are free to go wherever you want. And if you prefer two horny assholes on a raft to your family, please go and stay there. Remember, I said, my wife's not going. If you go, you can stay there. I don't want you to come back. Do you understand?" What the hell do you mean? Our relationship is built on an agreement between us that we will honor the vows we made to each other during our wedding. I want and intend to go to this team training camp. It's important for my job. You can't stop me, and I never promised not to go to work because of your accusations. You're right. I can't and won't stop you from going where you want to go. But if you're going to have fun and spend the night on that damn raft with two girls and one cheap whore, I want to know where to send the cardboard boxes of your stuff. If you're going there, then you're out of our relationship. Is that clear? Rose is right. You're a goddamn male pig. Rose is a cheap whore who ruined her own marriage. She's jealous of you for having a family. That's just your opinion. Do you really think she's happy? Do you think I'm happy? No, because she's made you believe that real happiness is sleeping with your married boss twice a week and sitting alone in a studio apartment most of the other nights waiting every other weekend to see her daughter. I had no further comment, and Samantha and I spent the rest of the evening in complete silence. And even the next morning, we had nothing to say to each other. When Samantha came home from work and saw the cardboard boxes I had bought for the day, she realized that I was serious about kicking her out of the house if she went rafting with Greg. She cried a little, then made dinner for the kids and went to bed without saying a word to me. It wasn't my responsibility to tell her about her legal right to stay in the house for 6 months after filing for divorce. First thing Friday morning, she told Christopher that she had a change of plans for a team-building event and that it was my fault she had to stay home. That pissed him off. He called me at work. After a polite conversation, he demanded that I let Samantha go to an important team-building event. I told him that from what I knew of Rose, she was capable of taking care of both him and his entourage. Then I even asked him if his wife knew that he was going rafting with his mistress. Finally, I advised him to forget about his plans for my wife if he wanted to preserve his health. At the end of the conversation, he swore like an old docker, and I suspected that I had not made a good impression on him. I now realized that Samantha had some vestiges of common sense left, and she had used them. She valued her family higher than one night with Greg and Christopher, who was obviously furious because his hopes of meeting the four of them and getting a taste of Samantha had been dashed. But what did he expect when their plans were so obvious and I knew all about them? Even if Rose had managed to convince Samantha to think I was a male pig, she wasn't stupid enough to put our marriage on the line for the sake of one night with two married men like Christopher and Greg. If she really wanted to sleep with either of them, she would have done it without letting me know her plans. Samantha stayed home, but was very unhappy with my interference in her affairs at work. She hardly spoke to me all weekend, and all thoughts of love and sex were eliminated. I accepted this as the price I had to pay to save our relationship. In a small Scandinavian town, gossip spreads fast as wildfire. Although Samantha had barely spoken to me since the ill-fated team-building weekend, rumors of her boss's rafting adventures had reached me at work as early as Wednesday. During a coffee break, one of my coworkers who knew where Samantha worked asked what we did over the weekend. When he realized she hadn't gone to the river, he told a funny story his mom had heard from her sister. A secretary from Samantha's job had spent the weekend on a raft with her two bosses and was complaining of lower abdominal pain. That evening, I told Samantha that gossip about Rose being sick was going around town, and that I was right about what had happened on that raft. She started accusing me of being a boring Mr. Perfect, who never dares to do something stupid and unexpected. I realized she was still mad about the cardboard boxes, so I didn't get into an argument about why those bosses with Rose were better than a faithful, perfect husband. Instead, I decided to give her at least 2 weeks to calm down and decide what she wanted to do in the future before seriously talking to her. She was free to leave at any time if she found something better than our relationship. On Friday, I decided to step away from my Mr. Perfect image and spend time after work with 3 single guys. An hour after I finished work, I called Samantha and told her where I was and that I could stay a little longer. I bought a few drinks for the attractive married woman and had a pleasant conversation with her. Her name was Monica, and she was complaining that her husband had become a boring sports fan who spent his free time drinking beer and watching soccer on TV. I told her that my wife had started nagging me about anything because I wouldn't agree to her spending the night with her boss. With each drink, we understood each other's problems better, and we exchanged phone numbers before we left. Samantha was mad as a viper when I got home because I missed family fun with our kids. So what? I was no longer Mr. Perfect. Saturday night, things got much worse. We were invited to a dinner party at a friend's house. Samantha was dressed up very nice and sexy. When I told her how beautiful she looked, she coldly replied, "Don't expect anything tonight, that's for sure." There were 5 couples gathered around the dinner table, and as usual, there was a lot of joking and laughter. Christina, the hostess of the evening, noticed that I wasn't in the best mood and asked if something was bothering me. I replied that Samantha's work colleague and mentor Rose had managed to convince Samantha that I was a real man pig, and told them a funny story about Rose's nakedness in the neighbor's closet and her complaints of a sore stomach after a night of team building on a raft with 2 horny bosses. Everyone except Samantha had a good laugh when I told the story. The laughter continued when Morgan, who was sitting next to Samantha, asked her if she had any plans to help her poor mentor on this romantic team-building trip. She turned red as a tomato and yelled at him, "What the hell do you mean? Are you accusing me of being a slut?" Christina realized the joke had gone too far and cut the conversation short by talking about something else. Throughout dinner, Samantha didn't say a word to me or Morgan. At home, she started yelling at me for humiliating her at dinner. For the first time in our marriage, I asked her to shut up. When she shut up, I told her that although I was no longer Mr. Perfect, everything I had said about Rose was pure truth, and she should thank me for not saying anything about her trying to join that damn party on the damn raft. Instead of thanking me, she cursed me in a way that could hardly be considered a sympathetic woman raised by church-going parents. Of course, No sex in our bed that weekend. I called Monica on Monday and invited her to lunch on Tuesday. She agreed, as long as I understood it would be lunch and nothing more. I said I didn't mind, and we had a very pleasant lunch at a nice restaurant, deciding to do it again. I was surprised at the strong feeling I had for Monica, even though nothing had happened between us. At home, some semblance of the status quo was maintained. Samantha and I did what we had to do and talked to each other only when necessary, avoiding small talk. Sex was out of the question, and I began to daydream about Monica from time to time. I was looking forward to Samantha's annual company party, which was scheduled for the following Friday. Although Samantha hadn't told me anything more about their friendship, I had heard the latest gossip. When the leading local activist for the new feminist party heard about Rose's adventures on the raft, she wrote letters to Christopher and Greg's wives and to their company's main office. There was talk that representatives had come from the main office, and Christopher and Greg were having problems with their wives. Monica called me about meeting on Friday after work, but I told her that I had promised my kids to have family fun with them and suggested we meet at the mall on Saturday. She agreed. That family fun night turned out to be one of the best I've had in a while. Samantha was very nice to me. We joked, laughed, and really had a good time together. I have hope that we are back on good terms and can strengthen that relationship with a nice time in bed. When the kids went to their rooms to sleep, I complimented her on a pleasant evening. To my great disappointment, she replied in a cold voice, "Don't expect anything tonight, that's for sure." I had hope. Forget it. Okay, my hope for tonight has faded. But it's time for us to think about the future. I hear your favorite Greg is having serious marital problems. Do you plan to take care of him when his wife leaves him? Or do you aim higher and prefer your boss Christopher, even if he gets dumped for an orgy on a raft? Or are you going to live the single life like your guru and mentor Rose? You should know there's gossip in town that you and Greg were seen in love in a restaurant, and then you were in his hotel room. The story about Greg's hotel visit caught her off guard, and she blushed, not answering my question. Don't listen to or believe all that damn gossip. Please answer my question. You and I are having problems right now, and I'm still mad about your cardboard boxes and the way you humiliated me at Christina's dinner. I don't know what to do about it, but I'm not going to do anything stupid that will make our problems worse. I could swear that since I've known you, I've never slept with Greg or anyone else behind your back. Yes, I was 5 minutes, maybe less, in Greg's hotel room after helping him shop during his lunch break. I could have sworn there was nothing there. I don't care what Rose does, but don't compare me to her. I didn't expect such a low argument from you as accusing me of being just like her in your opinion. You ought to know me better. I'm not accusing you of anything. I just know that you don't think I'm good enough for you anymore, and I want to know your plans for the future so I can start making my own, which will be necessary if you continue to treat me like pure shit. If you're thinking about Monica, you can forget about her, because her husband told a friend of mine that he's going to work out their problems. I don't have any plans at the moment, and even if I did, Greg or Christopher wouldn't be part of them. But I wouldn't mind having lunch with either of them, or even stopping to give Greg a hug or a kiss on the cheek after a nice meal. But any further relationship with any of them is out of the question. I never said you were a really bad person or accused you of being some kind of shit. You're a good father to our children and have many other virtues, but we're in serious trouble at the moment. Yeah, and all those problems started with Greg's courtship and Rose's talk about me being a pig trap and making you easier prey for Greg. Greg seems like a real ghost in your thoughts. What about your tryst with Monica? I mentioned that because I know you haven't tried any tricks so far, but don't try to use her marriage problems to your advantage. We ended the conversation. Although I knew that gossip spreads fast in small towns, I was a little surprised that Samantha knew about my innocent encounters with Monica. Samantha went to bed and I watched a movie on TV before going to bed. Saturday I left early, first for work and then to the mall where I met Monica in a crowded cafe. We chatted pleasantly for half an hour and even took a half-hour walk in a nearby park, We decided to have another short date over a cup of coffee the following Saturday. My problem with Monica was that I really didn't know anything about her feelings for me. Maybe she had no intentions of going any further than friendship at all. On the other hand, if she was interested in an affair, I didn't want to give her false hope of that until Samantha and I decided to go our separate ways. It was a complicated situation. Samantha was having her annual garden party at work the following Friday, and right after meeting Monica at the mall, I decided that Sunday would be the day to finally get my affairs sorted out. My plan was simple. First, give Samantha a choice between me and leaving. If she chose to leave, I would confess my feelings to Monica and offer to start a relationship or even cohabitation if she wanted. For the sake of the kids, I would have preferred Samantha to stay, but as far as I could tell, there was at least a 50% chance of losing them both. The garden party was an old company tradition, and the new owners intended to continue it. The venue, a lovely natural park on a peninsula between the building and the lake, was ideal for such events. However, it was useless for other purposes because of the remains of a Viking village discovered under the soil, making the area protected. The old owners had big plans for the area and bought it for a high price. When they were ready to start the project, they had to pay for a limited archaeological survey, which uncovered an ancient village. The county administrative board declared it a protected area, and the owners' appeals to the government changed nothing. However, the site remained ideal for the annual garden party, and the company rented 2 large marquees, one for dinner and one for the bar and dance floor. The party was attended by all the employees with their spouses, as well as some clients and subcontractors, usually about 120 people. Samantha and I had attended this party every year since she started working for the company, and she didn't mind when I said I would go with her. She didn't say anything to my questions about the future, and I didn't insist. It was business as usual, with one exception. I made a copy of the key to the side door of her office that was used when they worked overtime, in case she decided to sequester herself in there with Greg or Christopher. A silly thought, but people often act irrationally after a few drinks at a party. Monica called me Friday morning and canceled our meeting on Saturday because she and her husband were going to work out their problems over the weekend. She suggested lunch on Monday instead, and I was fine with that. Samantha's work ended Friday at 1 p.m., and she had her hair done nicely by that evening. She wore a new black pantsuit that I hadn't seen before. Samantha really looked great. When we arrived at the party, Christopher and Greg were greeting the guests at the entrance to the marquee. We got in line among many other people, and they greeted Samantha and I with the same welcome as the rest of them. The absence of their wives didn't make me suspicious, but I had a feeling they thought I was the mouse the cat brought into the house. I didn't care, because I didn't have a positive impression of any of them. Greg had put on some extra weight, and I noticed something strange in his eyes. I suspected he might have been on some kind of drugs. The party went on as usual. The old owners had decided it would be good for the company if people knew each other better, so seats at the dinner table were allocated by lottery. Guests were given sealed envelopes with seat number cards and 3 vouchers for the bar. The vouchers were a tradition from a time when alcohol was highly restricted. Those who didn't use all 3 could put the remaining vouchers in the basket with the extra ones on the bar. When the bell rang, everyone opened their envelopes and took their seats. I had lovely young wives sitting on either side of me. Samantha sat a fair distance from Greg and Christopher. There were no problems during dinner. When the bar opened and the dancing began, I noticed that Christopher and Greg had long since moved away from the bar. Christopher was sitting in the far corner talking to a stranger. Greg walked over to Samantha and led her to the dance floor. It was hard to tell if they were dancing or wrestling, but I didn't care as long as they stayed in plain sight. I watched them for about 10 or 15 seconds when a rather attractive woman in a short skirt and with nice legs came up to me and asked me to dance. I said yes. Since it was a slow tune, she came very close to me and whispered in my ear, "So you are Samantha's jealous husband? Nice to meet you." Jealous husband? A jealous husband would crush that baboon's balls for fighting with my wife. And who are you, my love? Rose, a friend of your wife's. Nice to meet you, Rose. I've heard so much about you. Pleasant news from Samantha, I presume? Nothing of interest from her? Other sources are much better. Such as? A naked hottie in the closet sounds tempting. How the hell do you know about that? Your exploits on the river are already legendary, and the news is spreading like wildfire. Jesus. He doesn't care, but you're a beautiful girl. Even I want to try my luck when Samantha and I break up. You're always welcome to try, big boy. That depends on what Samantha does with that baboon. I hadn't been very polite to Rose when I mentioned the closet, but why would I do that after all she had contributed to my marriage? Samantha saw Rose and I moving closer to her time and time again during the dance, and tried unsuccessfully to put some distance between us and Greg. Although the party was going great and there were no problems, I preferred orange juice over hard liquor in case something did happen. Rose avoided me after our dance, but was having a good time with one of the junior techs, who led her away from the party fairly early. This obviously spoiled the mood for Christopher, who had too much to drink. I managed to play a few tunes with Samantha on the dance floor. She was her usual kind wife self again. During our first dance, she asked me about my dance with Rose, and I told her the truth, that she was a sexy woman and promised me a date if Samantha went too far with her wrestling baboon. Samantha told me that she was really doing her best to avoid Greg. I suggested she dance with me next time, and she agreed. Greg had been stalking her most of the time, and it had cost her a lot of effort to avoid him throughout the evening. I offered to calm him down, but she declined and said she had it under control, which she did because some of the staff noticed her problem and took turns dancing with her to tease Greg. During our last dance, Samantha came up close to me, asked me to save the last dance for her, and suggested we have a serious talk when we got home from the party. I got curious and offered to leave right away, but she told me to be patient and have a good time at the party. But just half an hour later, when I returned after a brief visit to the men's room some distance from the entrance, neither Samantha, Greg, nor Christopher were to be seen in any of the marquees. I asked one of the employees smoking near the entrance if he had seen Samantha or Greg. He told me that they had walked toward the building with Christopher and another man he didn't know, probably from the main office. I feared the worst and walked toward the building. There were lights on in the building due to the party. Why the room was bright, no one knows. I decided to go inside. To my great fortune, I was able to open the back door with my key. At the stairs leading to the basement, I heard some noises. I snuck down into the basement. I had been down there once before with Samantha when she worked overtime and led me into the building when I took her home after work. I knew there was a small gym and a changing and restroom with showers. As far as I remembered, there was a comfortable leather couch and 2 soft armchairs at one end of the dressing room. I guessed the sounds were coming from there, and as I moved closer, I heard a woman scream. Pressing my ear against the door, I heard the woman, who I now recognized as Samantha, scream, "No, no, no, don't let him do this to me! Help me, help me, help me!" An angry male voice replied, "Shut up, you damn tease. You're only getting what you asked for." She continued to scream, "No, no, no! Help me, Christopher, you have to help me!" Christopher shouted, "I'm not here and I didn't see anything. That's your problem, bitch." Now I knew there were at least 3 men there, and Greg was clearly raping my wife, and the other 2 were watching and probably waiting their turn. I had no weapon and saw nothing useful as I made my way to the door. I can hardly claim to be an experienced fighter, far from it. My wife was in danger and there was no time to wait for help. Therefore, I had to help her myself as soon as possible. The only thing I could do was to try to take them by surprise, which should have given an advantage in the first few seconds of action. The other major advantage was that I was almost sober, but at least Greg and Christopher would have to be pretty drunk to do something as stupid as raping a married co-worker. I opened the door a few centimeters, but I couldn't see the couch. Samantha was still screaming, "No, no, no," and Greg was berating her for resisting. I crept further into the room and, standing next to the locker, saw Samantha topless in a tank top and neck bra, lying on the black leather couch, wriggling and kicking. Greg was holding her wrists above her head with his right hand and slipping his left hand inside the waistband of her pants, trying to get at her. To me, he posed no immediate danger. Now I found the unknown man standing at the foot of the couch, filming what was happening with a video camera. I realized that Christopher, with his obviously empty hands, was the biggest threat to me, so I decided to attack him first. Before attacking, I tried to locate him, but from where I was standing, he was not visible. Christopher found me, disrupting my thoughts. The sound of his footsteps made me turn around, but his hands were already behind my back, clutching my wrists. He shouted out, "You got caught, motherfucker!" A third man with a camera stared at us in amazement and took aim with his camera. Greg was too busy with his actions on Samantha to pay attention to us. Christopher believed he was in control of the situation and didn't expect my actions. I was a member of the local car club and had a club badge hanging from my belt. It was larger than normal, like most club members had, and it was worn on their jackets. I had to use it as a weapon. My right hand moved quickly to my belt, pulled out the badge, and slapped it forcefully on Christopher's lower abdomen. He let out a horrified scream and loosened his grip. I then turned around and slapped him hard on the cheek, causing him to fall. The third man froze as I approached him. He raised his arms to defend himself, but I kicked him hard on the knee first, knocking him off balance, and then kicked him hard in the stomach and on the cheek. He went down. Greg, noticing the danger, let go of Samantha, and she immediately pounced on him, clawing at him with her nails. I quickly kicked him in the balls with my foot and went back to Christopher, who tried to get up again. My right fist punch sent him to the floor again. The third man tried to get up, but I felled him again. Greg, covered in scratches from Samantha, wriggled on the floor. I punched him in the face, forcing him to stay on the floor. Samantha then kicked him in the groin several times with her high heels. We didn't want to go to the police, knowing that self-defense laws could work in favor of our abusers. So I took Samantha away, leaving them lying there. Instead, we called a cab and returned home, where we made a strong drink and settled into bed, where I soothed her until she fell asleep. The next morning, Samantha whispered quietly in my ear, "Please lie on your back and just be." I silently confirmed, "Okay." She helped first herself, then me, and began kissing me gently. We didn't exchange words, just enjoyed the moment, knowing it was one of the best moments in our marriage. Then she clung to me and cried, apologizing for all the trouble she might have caused me. I comforted her, telling her that everything was okay and that what happened yesterday was not her fault. It was surprising to hear that Greg's attempted rape was no longer her main concern. She was more concerned about her behavior towards me lately. Samantha admitted that because of Greg's attention and concern, she was starting to feel something more for him, but not enough to change my feelings. She considered their relationship, wanting to see where it would lead before deciding how far she was willing to go. The supposed romantic night with Greg was making her uneasy, and she was even contemplating the possibility of doing something unseemly if things went as she expected. Although it was part of her work assignment, she didn't expect me to be outraged, at least not so vividly. Her reaction to my words and the cardboard boxes was furious. After a sleepless night, she realized that the only sensible solution was to drop the idea, as it was important to her that our children grow up with both parents. At first, she was very annoyed by my distrust and threats. But when she realized that I was right in my assessment of the situation, she began to doubt a future affair with Greg. My demands to know if Greg was part of her future plans, and the gossip about me and Monica, made her much more anxious than she had shown. Now she didn't want to do anything that would humiliate me, other than temporarily withhold sex. Before the company party on Friday, she called Monica, who warned her that she would be making a mistake if she decided to break things off with me. Monica told her that although her own marriage was also struggling, she had done everything she could to keep it together. Monica admitted that she and I had never gotten beyond talking about our problems and solutions to them. Samantha decided that after the party, she would give me all the tenderness she had been putting off during our crisis. Greg's struggles on the dance floor and his story about me asking Rose out made Samantha realize that she had acted like a silly fool, and now she wanted to come back to me as her loving husband. After their fight on the dance floor, she told Greg that the one and only man for her is me, and she was ready to quit if Greg gave her any trouble at work. Christopher warned her at the party that the controller wanted to talk to her about some business. Samantha was reluctant to do the work at first, but gave in when Christopher promised her that it wouldn't take long. She didn't suspect anything when even Greg went with them. When they told her that the meeting was being held in the basement, she was suspicious, but Christopher and Greg pulled her out when she tried to leave. Greg helped Christopher take off his jacket and then undressed her himself. There were bruises on her breasts from his forceful pinching. Samantha and I settled our differences and talked one more time before I called my lawyer, who wanted to see us before lunch. Afterward, we stopped by Samantha's parents' house to pick up the kids. Epilogue. The third member of the rape gang turned out to be Frank Anderson, a married man who worked as a controller at the main office of the company where Samantha worked. His videotapes became important evidence for our lawyer, who used them in negotiations with the managing director of the company where the rapist worked. The lawyer worked perfectly. Christopher, Greg, and Frank were fired. After they left the company, security scrutinized their computers. On Frank's computer in his office, many hardcore forced sex videos were found, indicating his involvement in an online group involved in sharing such material. When the three wives learned the real reason for their husband's dismissal, they all filed for divorce. How could three married men in high places be so stupid as to videotape the commission of such a serious crime as rape? The lawyer suggested that Frank had somehow managed to convince them to take drugs during the party. Christopher was furious that Rose had rejected him in favor of a young technician, and Samantha warned Greg that she would quit her job if he didn't stop his attempts to seduce her. Under the influence of drugs, they saw nothing wrong with Frank's plan to stage a rape, videotape it, and blackmail Samantha into staying on the job and becoming the company's whore. Frank could have sold the video by removing the faces and all the names. They could even have used the edited excerpts to blackmail Samantha. Samantha received a 3-year salary for dropping the lawsuits and even got a job with Greg and Rose as a secretary. One of the former owners promised to replace Christopher for 3 months, so the company would have time to find his replacement. Rose now lives with a guy she met at a company party. They invited Samantha and me over for dinner one Saturday night. After a delicious dinner, she expressed her desire to rid herself of all shadows of the past. Her boyfriend told us he knew about her past, but he didn't care what she had done before they met at the party, and he was fine with her doing a purge in her life. Rose apologized for her role in Greg's attempts to seduce Samantha, which led to problems in our relationship. We told her that we held no grudges because her intervention may have helped save our marriage by exposing problems that made me think twice, and Samantha choose between Greg and our family. I told Rose that if Samantha had remained a regular good wife to me and hadn't made mistakes like the night on the raft, I wouldn't have suspected her of cheating. We maintained our friendship with Monica and her husband, even keeping our marriages intact.